Welcome to Helping Organizations Thrive podcast. Today I have the pleasure of John Stapleton. Welcome, John.
Good morning. Great to be here, Julian. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, it's brilliant to get to know you. I'm just going to tell our audience a little bit about you. You're known as the authentic entrepreneur. You've got over 30 years experience in pioneering new sort of food sort of categories and establishing and growing consumer-led businesses, both in the UK and the US. I know currently you're based in Germany. You were the founding member of New Covent Garden Soup, those fresh soups that we love and dear in the UK. And then you also set up a business in the US, a fresh soup business called Glencoe Foods. You've been the co-founder of Little Dish, which is all about sort of fresh, natural meals for kids, sort of 1 year plus. You are an investor, speaker, advisor, and a mentor to many businesses. So you've got a wealth of experience, a wealth of challenges over that sort of span. And I just, first, before we go into the conversation today about sort of building resilience in a pandemic, I just want to ask, what do you love about what you do?
And how much time do we have, Julian? That's a great question. It really is. And it kind of like, when you're an entrepreneur, you tend to, get a momentum and you're carried along on a wave of enthusiasm. And sometimes you don't have time to think about that question. You don't have to have time to think about why you do this and what you like about it, because it's also consuming. You're always kind of thinking, how couldn't I love it? It's like it's just so, it almost defines me at times, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel that. But of course, I was going to say I'm not an entrepreneur anymore, and maybe it's like religion. I don't know. Once you're an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur or something. but actually, I set up 3 businesses, like you said. So I spent 30 years of the first. What was it? The first 30 years of the 35 or however many years I've been doing this was setting up and running my own businesses. What I do these days is, and you touched on it, is I do a bit of speaking, and I do a bit of mentoring, and I do a bit of business advice, and I invest in businesses. But I guess the thing about it is I've got my finger in so many different pies in different businesses. And while a lot of it is, or some of it is the same in terms of, you're building a brand like New Covent Garden Soup Company. You're building a brand. You're designing a new product, you're trying to launch it, you're trying to sell to the retailer and then market to the consumer and all that. So that is kind of similar, but every business is different. Every product is different. Every target group is different. And, when we set up New Covent Garden Soup Company way back in 1987, right? Well, there's got to be things different between now and then, right? And there has been every 5 years, there's been a revolution, a change. Online has come. Never existed before when we set up Soup, for example. So a lot is happening all the time. But I kind of thought when I set up my own business, you get, because you get to do everything when you're an entrepreneur. When you start out, you do everything because there's only you, right? The guy called Andrew Farmer had the idea at New Covent Garden, and he and I set up the business, but we were co-founders. And then at Little Dish, I set up the business as well. But again, I was co-founder of Little Dish, and the business in the States, I was co-founder there too. So there were 2 of us, but ultimately you end up doing everything yourself between the 2 of you. And I used to think that means that you've got great variety because you're doing everything, right? You're covering every possible angle, doing everything. And after a period of time, you bring some people on, of course, and you delegate, but you're still doing an awful lot. Until I stopped doing it and started becoming an advisor and a mentor and an investor. And then I started to realize, because when you're a non-executive, you can't do stuff. You can't get in the way of the people who are doing the doing. Effect.
Do you find that difficult?
Oh yeah, absolutely. For the first while, I really did, because I'm a kind of people would say to me, "Are you sure you want to do this? Because you're a very sleeves up, rolled up kind of guy, and I want to get stuck in." And I do enjoy getting stuck in, and I guess most entrepreneurs do, because that's the nature of being an entrepreneur. Yeah. But the comparison between doing it myself was, it's not actually a very broad experience. It's a very narrow experience because it's just one business. It's a very deep experience. It's like a big, long tunnel that keeps running, keeps going down and down and down and down. And that's where you got a huge amount of stuff to do. But the experience is not broad. The experience is quite narrow. And I only realized this when I started to then expose myself to other businesses and do things in different ways. And that experience is very broad. But by definition, you're not doing stuff because you're spreading yourself too thinly. You are doing very little. You're advising and you're encouraging and you're providing support and direction. So it's very shallow. So it's not deep, but it's broad and wide. And that variety getting back to your question, that variety is what really gets me going, because it's great to see all these things happening in different environments. You know, different businesses, like I say, yes, things are the same in terms of you making product and selling it, and people are eating it and consuming it.
Yeah.
But every business is different. Challenges are different. People are different. And that is great. So I love getting involved in all this variety and being involved in different areas and seeing what's new and coming over the hill, if you like. And that keeps me involved, keeps me relevant, and keeps me young, I think, to a certain extent. So that's kind of like my new passion. The last 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it was, has taken over.
And does that, do you still feel that sort of entrepreneurial sort of spirits when you're in those meetings and in those contexts? Because obviously you do like to obviously grab hold of things, and now you're thinking a bit more broader and a bit more wider and influencing people in a different way by mentoring and everything else. Do you still feel that buzz of entrepreneurial ideas and sparking and sort of, can we go after this? Can we go after that? What about doing things differently?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, like, to be fair, once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. You can't shake it off. It's something that follows you around. You have a very inquisitive mind. I mean, the thing about it is, I started off way back. I studied science. You know, I was an industrial microbiologist, believe it or not, and then I studied food science. So I wasn't prepared for entrepreneurship at all. I was prepared for science-based thinking, which is very logical and structured and theory, and you spend a lot of time figuring out if that theory works. Whereas in the entrepreneurial world, you don't have time or resources for any of that. You just have a bit of intuition. You try and test the intuition and make sure it's true, but you get on with it by trial and error, and you therefore try things, and if they don't work, you pivot around and change something new, and you find out over a period of time what works, and you do more of that, and you figure out also what doesn't work, and you do less of that. And that's pretty much, you know, the curious mind of an entrepreneur. So I wasn't prepared for that when we started off New Covent Garden. I was like a bit of a fish out of water, really, when we tried to put soup in a carton for the first time, and everybody was telling us it was a crazy idea. Don't even think about it. You know, you're mad. And we were kind of thinking, well, actually, I'm not sure if we are mad, but we didn't know for sure. So there was a lot of new frontiers and a lot of new things we were trying. And you need to have a certain, I think, curiosity and a certain bent for that kind of approach, and a certain approach to managing risk, because it's a hugely risky environment that you're in. You know, you are trying new things, you are trying things that have never been done before, and everybody's telling you you're wrong. So you really have to have the courage of your convictions, something I say a lot. So that is intoxicating, if you like, that kind of environment. So I took it very quickly, and then haven't looked back ever since. So you can't leave that 30 years behind and sort of become a different person. You know, I still leverage all that experience when I'm
absolutely
now.
That's good. And obviously you've had 30 years of experience, and I'm sure in those 30 years or 35 years of managing, creating businesses, you've had numerous of challenges and difficulties along the way that has probably enabled you to be, I guess, I would say, more resilient. And, you know, we're facing, and we're still in the middle of this pandemic. We're still in the challenges. Yes, we're thinking more optimistic about this year. Vaccines are available, but there is still some way to go. And I want to get your thoughts on how do we, I guess, continue to keep going, continue to build that resilience, because there's still, I think, some way to go. And, you know, not to be down on things, but to be realistic about things as well. So what are your thoughts on that?
That's a great leading question, because I absolutely agree. I think, you know, one of the things entrepreneurs are good at is recognizing that things are tough, but they don't run away from them. They kind of go, you know, tough is fine, because that's what I'm here for. And I think that's where we are again right now in terms of this pandemic. But you know, resilience. I just want to kind of debunk this word resilience for a bit, because I think it's overused. People throw it into conversations a lot, and I'm not sure if they really know what they mean. And that's okay, but then that takes over. And what really is resilience? And I'll try and define it, I suppose, in a minute. But you know, global pandemics aren't the only time to have resilience and to build resilience. You know, global pandemics don't come around very often, thankfully. And you know, we have faced adversity before. You know, I'll use that word adversity because I think that defines almost what an entrepreneurial world is like. But of course, COVID is different. You know, it's been a global effect, and it's been accelerated, and it's not industry specific. You know, and it's happened so quickly. Yeah, so all these things have been kind of forced upon us with lockdown in terms of changing consumer behavior. So it is kind of unprecedented, right? because it's been so accelerated. But I think smart entrepreneurs observe these changes, right? And they will reposition their business or even pivot their existing business to be at the front of the pack to capitalize on the shift in consumer behavior. I use the word consumer behavior because I'm in FMCG or food, food and drink. So they're consumers for me, but customers really is what they are. And the anecdote I'll use is, remember those empty shelves we had back in March and April, right? Now, many then believed this was due to panic buying. And of course, there was a bit of panic buying with toilet paper and stuff like that. But the majority of the out of stocks weren't really due to panic buying. They were more to do with everyone, and I mean everyone, adjusting their pattern of purchase slightly. So everyone was buying just a few more items every time they visited the store. They're putting a few more items into their basket. And if every shopping trolley has a few more items in it, guess what? The finely tuned stock replenishment system that the grocery chains in particular in the UK are going to be caught out. And the result is empty shelves. Now, the point about this is that it may only be a 5% change in people's behavior, but everybody's doing it. And if everybody's making the change, that results in a significant shifting in consumer behavior. And the businesses who notice this and figure this out for their particular industry are the ones who are going to do well and going to be well situated to drive an advantage from the current uncertainty we have. And I think that is a part of what resilience is about, And I think Julian, the other piece of it is what I call is stickability. So let me say what I mean there. History, if you like, has shown that periods of significant upheaval and stress inspire reinvention to overcome, I guess, the constraints and to overthrow the old assumptions. And achieving new solutions to new challenges. So some of the biggest companies in the world today were created during or soon after the financial crisis of 2008, right? Yep. This is like Instagram and WhatsApp and Uber and Airbnb, all started by ambitious people who otherwise would probably have ended up working in a big corporate or a bank or a management consultancy. But the economic climate wasn't suitable to that, so they went off and decided to set up their own business. And 2020 has not been like any other year, right? The shock unleashed by the pandemic has changed the world. But organizations and businesses have scrambled to kind of adjust or to overcome these challenges, and they innovated new capabilities and new products and new services in a matter of days and weeks, rather than the usual months and years that it would have taken. So all of that sort of innovation and pivoting and change.
So almost the challenge has propelled people, and I know just an example of like ways of working, isn't it? Where people, for years, this whole flexible working has been sort of banding about whether people can work from home, flexible working, and literally within a week, people had to send all their staff home and create that, and I'll hopefully encourage that way of working, the trust issues that was originally faced with all that. And so it's almost forced it and created that change. I mean, that's not innovation in a sense, but it's a sense of a behavioural change or something that needed to be prompted. So actually, challenges, and you've probably experienced in your businesses, actually make you potentially better if we approach it in the right way, I guess, isn't it?
This is exactly. Thanks for bringing me back to the point, because this is exactly right. It's like you can either react, well, in many ways, but there's two extremes. You can either react to challenge and uncertainty and adversity and setbacks by going, oh, bloody hell, the world's out to get me, and this is a bad idea. Everybody was right. This won't work, and I'll just go back to my day job. Or you figure it out and say, well, you know what? I'm trying to do things differently here. I'm trying to, of course I'm going to get resistance, and of course it's not going to be easy. And I'm probably going to get more than my fair share of setbacks, but I'm not fazed by that, because that is what an entrepreneur does. They root up trees and they crash through walls and they're swimming against the tide and they're being disruptive. So if you're being disruptive, guess what? There's going to be resistance to that disruption, because the state
just to interrupt. Just going back to your soup business, the New Covent Garden, and you said you had a lot of resistance and you were told that wouldn't work. And I presume they were probably from influential people were telling you that. It wasn't just like your friends. It was probably people who perhaps, I don't know, you might admire. I don't know. How did you overcome that sort of, not just resistance, that negativity, to keep going with something which it was a new thing, it was a completely new thing in the UK?
Yeah, it was. I mean, don't forget, this was 1987, so it's a long time ago. So this has been around for a long time, right? And I think a lot of your maybe listeners or viewers are you're gonna have to put their heads back or minds back to a time where they probably weren't around. 1987 is quite a while ago. I can remember very well. But no, all liquid soup was in a can. That's right. All liquid soup. If you wanted to buy liquid soup, you had to go to a restaurant or make it yourself, or you got to go to the store and go to the soup aisle, right? And go to buy it in a can. So when we set up Newcomen Garden Soup in 1987, we were told, especially by the so-called experts, right, that it wouldn't work. We were told, first of all, we were told you would kill someone. Yeah, we were told you would kill somebody. We were told that soup had to be sterilized, and therefore there's no point trying to put in a carton because a carton isn't sterilized. The carton is just fresh, right? But we wanted the soup, funnily enough, to taste of the ingredients we put into into the carton, not the process used to give it whatever it was, 18 months, which is what a can was. You sterilize. When you sterilize something, you kill the nutritional composition and you kill the flavor, really. And you have to put other flavors in to compensate for that. So we really wanted the product to taste like the way it should be, like if you make it at home, but obviously a convenient solution. And then also they said consumers will never find it. There's already a solution in there. It's in the store. It's called the soup aisle. Why would you want to, reinvent the wheel, guys? It works. Don't mess with it. People are never going to find soup in the chiller. It's a crazy idea. And, consumers loved finding soup in the chiller because it spoke so much of freshness, right? And then the final thing was the carton. They all said the carton is really stupid. They actually said that. Basically,
who are these people? Are these just these experts?
Yeah, they were experts, really. But don't forget, they were living in the conventional wisdom of the day. And the guys who said we will kill somebody, they were very, very, very reputable food scientists. The people I went to university with, right? They were looking at the reasons why you put soup in a can, and it's to sterilize it. So you know what? The conclusion therefore is, if you don't put in a can, it won't be sterilized, won't be safe. You'll probably kill somebody. And then consumers will never find it. That was a very non-entrepreneurial way of doing things. So there's already a solution. Why think of something new? And then the carton is stupid point. Well, that was kind of like, back in those days, milk went in a carton, or maybe fresh juice. So they were thinking, why would you want to put a savory product with bits in it? It makes no sense. Consumers won't understand it, is what they said. But of course, consumers loved the carton, and it became, iconic.
So just going back to all that, I mean, you've given me a number of negative things. I wouldn't want to launch a soup in a carton, to be honest. What got you through that? Because this is the essence of resilience. What got you through that to keep going and pursuing that, and to make a success of it? Because it is a success story.
Well, I think two things really, and one was kind of a stroke of luck. One was our own naivety, in that and arrogance as well. And I mean, a side point here is any successful entrepreneur has to have a certain degree of ego, because if you don't, you won't ever overcome all the resistance you get. And when I say ego, I mean, I don't know what I mean, but I mean kind of ego with the small e, right? Yeah. Ego that is in a positive sense. It gets you up in the morning with some real motivation to do something. And you have to have that ego, because you're going to get knocked down so many times. You're going to get told your idea is stupid so many times. And you have to kind of be able to not, have a thick skin and not bother about it and say, well, actually, I know better. And of course, we didn't know better at all. But what we did do was we had a lot of what I call, which is the second point, a lot of consumer insight. So you have to have the personality to say, I'm not going to listen to the naysayers. That's great. But also you have to root your logic and the reason you think you're right in some reasoning. And that is what I call consumer insight. So you got to go out there and find consumers and say, what do you think of this idea of putting fresh soup in a carton and putting it in the chiller, and it only has 14 days life, but it tastes really good. Oh, interesting idea. What does it taste like? Great, let's taste it. So we did a lot of consumer interfacing, a lot of consumer analysis to figure out, were we the only two guys who thought this was a good idea? Now, clearly that was never going to be the case, but was there enough people out there to justify building a new factory? Because we had to build a new factory. Nobody made fresh soup. We couldn't outsource it. We couldn't say, guys, can you make this for us? The answer is, how big do you want the can to be? We're going, no, we don't want a can. So the whole idea, we dreamt up a process that we actually patented. We patented the process to make fresh soup, would you believe? Because it was a novel process. So all this stuff we had to do ourselves. So there was a lot of mountain climbing here. But we were, back to our naivety, we thought there's got to be enough people out there who are going to be really, impressed by and enjoy the quality of fresh soup when they eventually get to taste it. So you have to figure out who these guys were. Like, you always have to define your target market when you're building a brand. That's so important. So we had to really understand who it was we were targeting, and design a brand to attract those guys in. And once they bought the product, really weird seeing something like this in the chiller where it didn't belong back in 1987, 88, 89. When they bought it, the key thing was they took it home and they loved it. It knocked their socks off. So the brand promised the consumer this was going to be a great product, and the product absolutely delivered. It was a great product. And then people come back and buy it again. And then people buy it more, and it gathered momentum. And then we began to, prove to the naysayers that we were right. But of course, there was an element of, a red rag to a bull, if you like. So many people telling us we were wrong and it was a crazy idea. And us kind of thinking, I don't know, I think there's enough people out there to make this work. And we stuck with it. And by the early 90s, we had the whole market to ourselves. And it was we had a tiger by the tail. We were managing other problems then. We were managing demand problems then, trying to keep ahead of demand.
Brilliant. So if you bring all those knockdowns you face, and obviously that's just one example, and bring it back to today and some of the challenges that businesses are facing right now, I guess with all your reflection and experience, what sort of advice would you give them today if they're facing, whether it's a challenge of customers, a challenge of employees, or just general business slowing down? What advice to try and keep themselves going, that motivation to keep going and to push through?
Sure. And by the way, so whatever I say is rooted in my own experience. So it's all sort of, reinforced lessons I've learned. And also when I say things, I'm very conscious that they sound so much easier when I say them, but going and doing them is an awful lot different kettle of fish. So, some things are easier said than done. But I do actually believe this, and just coming back to root and where we are right now in 2021, and everybody thinks it's it's all doom and gloom, and I was talking to a lot of people last week when it was New Year, and everybody was saying, "Oh, Happy New Year," and people said, "Oh, thank Christ, it's all over with," At the end of 2020, I never want to see it again. The back of that year, now we can look forward to 2021. And I think there's a whole bunch of emotion here, of course, that people want to leave it behind and move on. I get that. But actually, what's changed? Nothing. And actually, if anything, it's getting worse. And I, put this in context, but it's probably going to get worse and a lot worse before it gets any better, right? Why would it suddenly change on the 1st of January? Some people are wondering what our leaders are doing in terms of managing this, but irrespective of all of that, it probably is going to get a lot worse through February and through March, and hopefully the vaccine will take place, but will take hold and we'll move through, right? So it's easy to think that it's all doom and gloom. We got a second lockdown, we got infections and deaths rising. This is really serious stuff. Is it going to be worse than March or April last year? Death increasing, lockdown having its effect, and then business. And then, of course, what's really going to happen in 2021 is a recession is going to come along, right? So why are we so happy about 2021? Of course, we have to be proactive, and we have to be enthusiastic, and we have to be optimistic. But the point about it is that with resilience, it's not all doom and gloom. The environment is pretty desperate, and we are going to have a few more difficult months. And we are surrounded by uncertainty, we're surrounded by challenge, we're surrounded by chaos. The point is that all of these things present a huge opportunity. Yeah. So what we need to do, I think, is recognize the uncertainty recognize the uncertainty and the adversity that exists right now. And we need to look for more opportunity in the uncertainty, and we need to embrace adversity. And that might sound counterintuitive. That's the bit I was referring to. That probably does sound kind of counterintuitive. We need to embrace adversity. But don't forget that adversity surrounds us all. That's what I was saying earlier. For entrepreneurs, we probably have more of our fair share of adversity than most people, because it stands to reason, being disruptive, etc. And there's been a huge explosion in startups in the food and drink space in the last couple of years, and that will certainly continue. Our purpose-driven, disruptor, challenger brands are doing a great job. So an entrepreneur's life is defined by obstacles, or maybe better, it's defined by finding ways around obstacles. And as entrepreneurs, we encounter more obstacles and more challenges and more setbacks than most. So it's almost like we're courting adversity. So I'm not a great person for management quotes, but a guy, I think it was called Lou Holtz, he said, show me someone who's achieved anything worthwhile, and I'll show you someone who's encountered adversity. And I really like that quote because it's so true. And I think the corollary is also true. If you're not putting yourself out there enough, you're playing it safe, aren't you? And, who achieved anything exciting or innovative or successful by playing it safe? So regarding adversity, I say embrace adversity, because it's not a strong sign that you're onto a good thing and you've discovered something that nobody else has. Like I said earlier, as long as your idea is rooted in strong consumer insight and you know your target market, make adversity your friend. And don't worry, don't worry that you're meeting a lot of adversity all the time, because adversity often justifies and validates you have a great idea and you're onto something, right? So that, I say, is pretty much what we need to recognize today in the current world, where we're facing a huge amount of adversity and even more uncertainty.
And do you think we can take a bit of and this is about mindset shift sometimes, where we can actually see these challenges at the moment, and we've all got them in some capacity, and see that as a way of either propelling us into a new direction, propelling us into achieving more, or even using it as a competitive advantage in our space? Do you think that's a way to sort of shift it slightly differently as well?
Yeah, no, I love that competitive advantage reference because I think that's really what it's about. And by the way, when I keep saying, because I'm conscious of your audience might not all be entrepreneurs, and when I keep saying entrepreneur, I don't mean to be talking around people. I think it's more of an entrepreneurial spirit. So it's not just about people who set up their business, also entrepreneurs, right? A lot of entrepreneurial, like-minded people who work in large corporations. And I guess what I'd say is that you can be an entrepreneur in a large corporation, and it sounds like a bit of a contradiction in terms. And I've got a question for you, actually, because I think this defines the point. So if you have 5 frogs sitting on 5 logs, right? So if you have five corporate frogs sitting on a log, right? And 5 of them decide to jump off, how many are remaining? And before you try to figure it out, the answer is, well, 5, because there's a huge difference between deciding to jump off and actually jumping off, right? Whereas if those 5 frogs, if they were entrepreneurial frogs, they'd have gone long ago and have tried something, and they've probably got into some difficulty along the way, and maybe have been swallowed up by whatever, some other larger animal in the pond. But a lot of them would have made it to the edge and would have figured out, would have been stronger because of it, and would have then realized, okay, that's how you survive in this environment. So I kind of think that is a difference sometimes between corporate and entrepreneurial. But I think a lot of entrepreneurial-minded people operate in corporates, and they're the entrepreneurs. And I think smaller businesses are much more agile. But it's all about having the entrepreneurial attitude, and that is coming back to what I said at the beginning. That recognize that it's tough. But that is what you signed up for. That's the nature of the job. But don't let that fact get them down. It's just normal. Focus on the opportunity. So today there's lots of global uncertainty, right? And people are getting desperate and think of things that are outside our control. But I think the smart approach is to be entrepreneurial minded and accept it's tough. And no one's going to do any favors. But I think the key point here is take control of your own business destiny, right? Yes. Have calm observation, recognize uncertainty, embrace adversity, and seek out the opportunity, and turn this uncertainty into a competitive advantage. Coming back to your point, and I think the competitive advantage is really interesting, because it's not that you need to be the best in the world. You just need to be better than your competitor, right? It's not that you need to have everything perfect. You just need to have it perfect enough to be better than your competitor, and then figure out things along the way that'll make it even better. I know. Do you remember the famous, or whether it was famous or not? I can't quite remember now. It was Billy Connolly. That was it. Remember one of Billy Connolly's favorite jokes, Julian, about the lion in the Serengeti plain. Yeah. Let me just tell you that, because I think it's a silly joke, right? But I think it's a really interesting way of explaining this competitive advantage piece, because. So here it goes, right? A pair of journalists are filming lions on the Serengeti plain, right? And one is the tripod open with his camera, and the other guy is the sound guy or whatever. And the lions are far enough away at the moment, not to be bothered by these guys. But gradually the wind changes, and the lions pick up their scent, right? And the lions then kind of nonchalantly meander in the direction of the cameraman. And they gradually begin to pick up pace. And the cameraman decide, right, we've got a problem here. One cameraman slips off his shoes and pulls on a pair of Nikes, right? And the other cameraman looks at him and goes, you don't think you're going to outrun the lion in those, do you? And the other guy goes, well, I'm not so much concerned about the lions. All I know is I'm going to outrun you. and this is the point. This is the competitive tension that's here, that I don't need to be the world best sprinter. I don't need to be a lion to outrun a lion. I don't even need to outrun a lion. I just need to outrun the other guy who's not going to be as prepared for this situation. So you need to be better than your competition, better prepared than your competition.
Yeah.
And I think that is really the competitive advantage. So, you need to figure out where your consumers have gone to, or what they're, coming back to the very beginning, what their behavioral change is, what's been forced upon them because of lockdown, how they're operating, how they're buying stuff. Are they buying new stuff, or they're buying stuff differently? That was the market. And you, again, need to get into pole position to be in best possible place to supply that new need to that new consumer requirement, while your consumer is still trying, while your competitor is still trying to figure out working the old business model and still trying to figure out how to get to the consumers as if nothing had happened. And I think that, for me, is resilience. That, for me, is being smart. And that, for me, is turning uncertainty into a competitive advantage.
Brilliant. I really like that. And that's a real mindset shift. And I think it's getting back to that, being in control of what you can control, embracing that adversity, and then using that to then look for those competitive advantages, those opportunities, and just going after it. I really like that. I thank you for your time today, John. Have you got any last sort of words before you just tell people how people can get in sort of contact with you?
Yeah, listen, anybody with any interest for anything I've been saying during the course of the last half an hour, look me up on LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to do it. There's a profile there. I tend to keep my kind of speaking piece separate from what happens on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is more about my businesses and stuff like that. And I have a website which talks about, what I talk about generally in the context of speaking. And that's very simply my name. So it's www.johnstapleton.eu. So you can email me on that as well. What is it? John@stapleton.eu. So it's all very straightforward, really. So anybody have any comments or interest or disagree with anything I've said, that in particular, I like that. Come back and tell me what I've been saying is complete rubbish, and we'll have a good chat about that. Always open to challenges, always open to new ideas. And the final thing, really, in the context of where we're going with this, Julian, is I love learning. So I've never stopped learning because there's always new opportunities and new things and challenges. And people say you've been around for 35 years, you must have seen it all. Well, I've seen a lot, but I clearly haven't seen it all. And new things come up all of the time, which are intriguing or challenging. So anybody got any ideas there, any topics you want to talk about, be happy to exchange ideas and views.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for your passion, your energy, and your wonderful insights you've shared today. Much appreciated.
Not at all. I'm delighted to be part of this, Julian. Take care. Have a great 2021.
Thank you.